Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another F1 chat. And you may remember that in the previous video, we were talking about the F1 regulations for 2026. Yes, they're coming. Um, and there was a bit of hype building around it. But if any of you saw the description of the video on YouTube, you would have seen me say about the fact, so stay tuned because I've got my ideal regulations to come. And I had a long think about it. I had a little bit of an epiphany basically when discussing it of like going, what would be the ideal circumstances? What would be the ideal regulations? Because let's face it, F1 for a good long time has been a domination sport, for want of a better word. Yes, we had the odd season where things were amazing. Times like 2012, where there were 5 drivers from 3 different teams that were competing for the title, or 2010 where we had something similar. We have had those, and we have had seasons like 2006, I believe, where we had 2 different teams, that were unexpected competing, and it was a very competitive season. But ultimately, we have had eras of domination, whether that be from drivers such as Verstappen that's happening right now, Hamilton that happened, Schumacher that happened, Alonso to a certain extent that happened, because, it was 2 years, but it was still a dominating 2 years. Um, Even to teams like Williams or McLaren or Mercedes or Ferrari or Red Bull, there's been some kind of domination. And so when you want to talk about the glory days of Formula One, where it was really competitive, not just in the entire season, but even in the races and the racing, you have to look back quite far. You could say that the golden era, deaths aside, were the 70s and the 80s. And one of them becoming a Hollywood season as well, in the 1976 season. Actually, that is where we're going to start, was basically the 1976 season, because we focus on James Hunt and Niki Lauda, and so we should. They were absolutely incredible drivers. But I really want to show you this. Now, this isn't showing the extent of the cars or anything like that. These are purely the race winners from that season. Not in terms of drivers, in terms of cars. We had 6 different cars that were race winners. And it's not like it was a spec series. In fact, if you look at it, they were very, very different. You look at things like the Ferrari of Niki Lauda's, which has that sort of feel of what you would expect a Formula One car to be. Maybe that there's that little dip, but and there's a straight. So it's like an arrow straight rear wing, and the front wing looks a little bit like stepped up. And then you compare it to the McLaren to the side of it, where the side pods look quite different. The wing is curved. There was a bit of a fuse box in terms of the McLaren. That it looks very different. And then you got the Penske, the bottom right one, right? Where it felt almost like it was a land speed record challenging car, something very, very different. And actually, you look at the wheels and they were very different as well, the style in which it was. You got the Lotus in the top right hand corner, where you look at that front nose, it's straight, it's very unusual in terms of that. The engine cover is a little bit more exposed, and that wing looks very pronounced. Then you've got the March car, which is the top middle. Look at that front wing; almost looks like a lip of a sports car. Almost like it should be a NASCAR rather than Formula One. But again, a very, very different car. And that's before we even get into the Tyrrell car. Yes, a car with 6 wheels. Times were crazy in the 70s, and there's probably some, let's say, help in the madness from certain things, stronger than alcohol probably, that cause this sort of design. But look how crazy this was. 6 different teams that won, and this was, what? Yes, it was a little bit unusual, but actually, for a lot of seasons in the 70s and the 80s, there were a lot of different teams that won. Now, like I say, these cars are very different. So, why were they? Why are we in a situation where, for the past 20 odd years, every car in a season looks pretty much the same, just with a different colour? But then you go back to the 70s and 80s and they look bizarrely different, like they should be from different seasons. Well, down to the regulations, and this is where that idea of ideal regulations comes from, because the past 10, 15, maybe 20 years, the regulation changes has all been about entertainment, and has all been about trying to encourage closer racing and overtaking and trying to rein in the other teams, which is fair enough. But let's face it, that's been the target and that's not quite worked. Because here's the thing about entertainment, you can't guarantee it, right? You try and do something to try and entertain, it don't fully work. Take the life of a streamer. I'm trying things to try and entertain. It might not work, right? So you try and do closer racing, you might not get closer racing because things happen, designers happen. And designers love to find loopholes. So if designers love to find loopholes, then why don't we go back to what the regulations used to be about? The regulations used to be about trying to ensure that there was a balance of things, right? They were all about trying to introduce safety. So, actually, in terms of regulations, they were quite lenient. It was all about just make sure the car's not too dangerous and make sure that they're all balanced out. To give you an idea in terms of the balancing out, right? They would do it so that, oh, if you wanted a turbo engine car, this is the size to have. If you wanted an engine that's not turbocharged, this is the size you should have. The limit, right? Because at that time they sort of worked out similarly, right? And so what happened? The designers had the opportunity to go berserk. And you had some of the craziest and some of the most fun designs. Had ideas where they were going absolutely wild with fan cars, X Wings, six wheelers, as you see here. And by the way, this is not the first season in terms of six wheelers either, right? Things in terms of different wing designs. And let's not forget the shape of these cars. This isn't from the start of Formula One. They were very different back in the day. So even that was the designers going wild. What am I trying to say here? Let's bring this back. Now, look, trying to bring this back is kind of crazy, right? To basically go full on rewind. We're not expecting that. But maybe the regulations just need to be looked at and going, right, where can we give designers the free reign to do something different? Where can we give them the free reign? Maybe it's a case of in the engines, right, that they can choose to make something smaller or bigger to make it more powerful, but it has to balance out, right? Things like the MGUH, the MGUK. If you don't know what those terms are, don't worry, it's just engine stuff. Things like that. Maybe it's a case of we're doing something in terms of the front and rear wings, right? And maybe it's a case of, well, here's the thing: you could choose what size you want the front and rear wings to be. Again, opening it out to the designers. These, like I say, were glory years of Formula One because the designers got to have some fun, and the cars got to have some fun, and the drivers got to have some fun, right? And maybe we should bring this back. Yeah, I hate to break it. It's one of the things that, whilst it's been, I will never say it's not enjoyable watching Formula One because look what's happening right now. But look what's happening when, from this season, when designers are finally getting to grips with things. It started off with McLaren are all of a sudden getting back up to speed and catching up with Red Bull, and they're finally figuring things out. Now, Ferrari have joined the fray. Now, from the Barcelona practice, there's a chance that Mercedes have now cracked their car. Who knows who else might join? And maybe it's a case of, right, the 2026 regulations, they're here to stay. That's just how it is, right? But maybe the new regulations after 2026 is all about relaxing rules, not tightening them up, not creating a new formula every single time. And here's the crazy thing. The two focuses in terms of competitive racing and cost saving that Formula One are trying to do with all these regulations. Well, here's the thing in terms of cost saving. By releasing the regulations and giving them a bit more free reign, they can have little tweaks and little design ideas, and look at the car and go, what can we change about that? What can we change about this? What can we change about the other? In regards to the competitive racing, again, it's allowing them to close up. Now, I hope to be hugely incorrect in my thinking here. I hope that 2026 ends up being an absolute banger of a regulation, of course. But they've got a pattern, and there is a chance that it might not work. So, what do you think, guys? Do you think trying to have some sort of 1970s, 80s regulations, a little bit of free reign, giving people like Adrian Newey absolute fun to do whatever they wanted, bring back the fan cars, bring back this, bring back that? Do you think that's the idea? Or do you think something else should happen? Do you think that there should be a different regulation that's brought in? What would you do? And whilst you're thinking about that, and whilst you're typing up your comments, please continue to subscribe, hit the notification bell, like the content, and see you around.